Hey, everybody. The need to know for this weekend, before I pass it over to Pastor Brent, there are 862 people across our connections at Timberline Windsor. Of course, there's some overlap, people in multiple groups with that, but that tells us a lot about where are the people of Timberline Windsor. They are in connections. 862 people accounted for across all of our connections. I don't say that as a braggadocious number. I say that as that's why we give these need to knows. Things that those 862 people, men, women, and children, need to know. Each week it's a highlight. Each week it's something important. And so this week the only need to know is that just needing you, the people in connections, to know the value of communicating with one another and just where the crowd is, where the people of Timberline Windsor are. They're in your connections. So thank you for that. With that, I'll turn it over to Pastor Brent.
Thanks, Pastor John. Well, it's so good to be together with you, and I'm glad that you have taken the initiative to be together as a community group. This week we looked at Mark chapter 1, verses 1 through 13, which is really the introduction of the ministry of Jesus through the person of John the Baptist, and we looked at a couple different elements in there. One of the areas that I wish we could have gone deeper into was looking at the character of John the Baptist. So here's kind of a couple challenges for you guys to actually do that, to dive a little bit deeper into that. Now, if you were to go to even a modern day Seder meal, that is a Passover meal in a Jewish home, you'd see a table and the whole family would be gathered around the table, and there would be one empty chair at the table. And you might think to yourself, oh, did Uncle Reuben get sick? Did he not show up this time? And they would explain, no one's sick, no one's absent. Well, kind of. That chair is set up for Elijah. You might think, who's Elijah? The prophet Elijah, the Old Testament prophet Elijah. And here's a way that you can kind of dive into that. I would encourage you, go to the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi. Go to the last chapter of the last book of the Old Testament. It's chapter 4. It's very short, very easy to read. And read that, and then think about this. How does that content, these are the last thoughts in their mind as the Old Testament closes, and it sets up their consciousness for something they're anticipating. And then they have 400 years to brood on that. 400 years to build anticipation of when is this going to happen. Number 2, I would say this. Think about the identity of John the Baptist. He comes, if you remember in the story we looked at, he's clothed in camel's hair and a leather belt. And in the Old Testament, when Elijah is explained, that's the exact same description, at least at one point, given of him, which is fairly common nomadic clothing that you would wear out in the wilderness. It's nothing that weird, but it's something about their expectations. Now, when John the Baptist comes on the scene, the religious leaders ask, are you him? Are you Elijah? And John says, no. Now, later in the same gospel, Jesus is going to be asked, when's Elijah coming? And he says, oh, he came. Essentially says, it was John. How do we square that? John says, no, I'm not Elijah. Jesus says, yes, this is Elijah. I think you'll find the answer if you can go to Luke chapter 1, verse 16, where John the Baptist's parents are told something specific about John and the ministry of Elijah. Number 3, last one, is we would love it if you could go to some of the other gospel accounts and look at the temptations of Jesus, because it was, as we talked about, Mark's very, just the bare bones, the basic things, but he doesn't go into details oftentimes. So you might go to Matthew chapter 4, where there's a much greater and deeper explanation of the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness. And I think it would be fascinating for you to just talk about the nature of those temptations in light of the passage that we looked at this week. So again, so glad that you guys are being together, and hope you have a wonderful week.